Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so good to see you all. So happy that you found our way to our community webinar this afternoon. I'd love to see who's all here. I see some hellos, So if you want to use the chat, make sure you select everyone so that way we can all see who's here. Where you're from, your state, your country, org, school. Just curious to see who's here with us this afternoon. Well, afternoon here on the East Coast. Hey, Seton Hall, Colorado, LA. Oh, excellent emoji use there. Hey, Robbinsville, hello. Yes, sunny for once here in New Jersey. Has some facilitators. Oh, hi, Pastor Shai. Good to see you here. To my friends and colleagues. So welcome everyone. I'm Evelyn Moon. I'm Director of Education here at Good Grief. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to spend time with you today. So just sending you all immense gratitude for your attention, for your presence, and for your interest in this topic. You can keep that chat going even as I move ahead with our slides. So today's session is part of our Good Grief Schools webinar series. It's the last one of the school year. I don't know if you could believe it. This school year has gone, it feels like so slow, but also so fast. But we are here, it is June, and every school year we will bring you content, we'll bring you experts, information, all as a way to extend our work outside of our centers here and into the virtual space. And just want to affirm or confirm, anyone who has attended today's live session will receive a certificate of attendance. Probably send that by tomorrow. So just keep a lookout in your inbox. You'll be getting a message from us. So I think many of you are probably familiar with us, but for those of you who Good Grief might be new, we are a nonprofit organization. We have been around here in New Jersey since 2004, and our mission is to build resilience in children, strengthen families, and empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. And that looks like a lot of pieces of work. This is sort of all the pieces of the whole of the puzzle that is Good Grief. We have our family support services. That's our nights of support that we run in our Princeton and Morristown centers. The children who have experienced the death of either a sibling or a parent or caregiver, their whole family unit can come and receive completely free and unlimited support. Good Grief Schools, that I think I see a few friends from our Good Grief School programs over in the chat and in our participant list, so welcome. Our Grief Expression Summer Camp is running this August. We have our Good Grief Spring Institute. That was our in-person one-day training that we do every March. It was at the Pingree School. We do PD and training, parent and caregiver education, and we also have a youth and funerals initiative. Enough about us. I am here to introduce our guest today. We have Mandi Zucker. She has over 20 years of experience in the field of death, dying, and bereavement. She's founder and president of Inner Harbor, where she provides training, resources, and consultations to universities, peers, students, teachers, all in an effort to help them be better allies and supporters to young adult grievers. She also hosts a podcast, which is very cool, the Mourning Meeting. It's focused specifically on young adult grief. She has a BA in Child Development and Care from the University of Pittsburgh, her master's in social work from NYU. She's also a lead responder for the Traumatic Loss Coalition, so the TLC. Very familiar with the TLC here in New Jersey. It's a great resource. And she also serves on the Overlook Medical Center End of Life Task Force and serves on the Board of Trustees at Jewish Family Services of Central New Jersey. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And let me stop my share.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Should I start my share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That worked?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1 second. I've got a funny bar. There we go. Okay. So thank you for the introduction. My name again is Mandi Zucker. I really appreciate all of you coming here today, putting your trust in me. I hope to be inspiring and educational. And I know that this is a webinar, so there's a little less interaction than if we were in person or in some other formats, but I am going to try to make this presentation a little interactive, so I will give you some opportunities to participate if you want to. I'll explain that as we go, but I just wanted to put that out there. I know that I'm not the only expert or piece of wisdom in the room, so I hope that we get to share a little bit from one another. I also like to just put it out there that sometimes these workshops can be a bit emotional for some of you. Talking about loss and grief may bring up some feelings that you didn't know you had, or they're just like right there on the surface for you. I hope that as we're doing this presentation, you take good care of yourself. I hope you have some water or some tea, whatever works for you. Maybe you're wearing fuzzy slippers if you're at home. I hope you have some time to continue some good self-care throughout the day. So I just like to sort of put that out there and normalize the experience that some of you might be having. Okay. There we go. So a little bit more about me. I am the founder and CEO of Inner Harbor. It's really an organization dedicated to supporting young adults who are grieving. I've been doing bereavement work for about 25 years, but I started Inner Harbor about 2 years ago. My oldest son is going to be a senior in college. I can't believe I just said that. When he went away to school as a freshman, most of his friends also went away, one of whom ended up taking his own life just a few days after he got to college. This was a boy whose father had died when he was 14. And I was working at a grief support center, and I found him and his family a grief support center, sort of similar to Good Grief in the area. And I think it was a really wonderful support for him. Obviously, we don't get to ask him what happened, but what we've sort of been able to piece together is that, he turned 18. A lot of supports just kind of disappear when you turn 18. And then we ship off our grieving children to lands far away, to college, where he didn't have any friends. He didn't have the support systems available to him. He didn't know what was available on his college campus. So he did what was available. He found alcohol and drugs, which he used for about 4 days before taking his life. And it was at that time that I decided I want to make sure that we're supporting children at the time of their loss, as well as helping to support the transition from high school to college, but also to all other kinds of environments that they may be going into. So on the 1-year anniversary of his death, I opened Inner Harbor. And I'm very excited today to be able to provide the exact kind of education that I think is so needed in this field. So for today, my goals include giving you an overview of what we've been learning about grieving young adults and some of the challenges that they've been experiencing as they navigate new environments after a loss. We'll also talk about what supports may be available on college campuses that could be different from a K-12 environment, and how to learn about these resources before you get to college. And then finally, we'll talk about finding the right emotional fit at college. We talk a lot about finding the right fit, but we're often talking about social life and academics. We're going to talk a little bit about how to find the right emotional fit. And how to create what I call an individual support map to help students identify important resources after a loss. This can also be used at other places, not just college, but I will be focusing a bit on college today, although I'm happy to answer questions or provide resources for people who are looking for supports in places other than an educational setting. So I mentioned that, this is a webinar, so we don't get a lot of back and forth, but I will invite you to share a little bit and collaborate. So I hope we can all add our own wisdom to this room. I know that I'm the facilitator, but I'm certain that there is a ton of talent and learning that could take place if we were all together. So I'll try to give some opportunities for all of us to be able to do that. Okay, so first of all, let's just start with some statistics. This is a 2021 statistic. It's already changed. But in 2021, we learned that 1 in 14 children will lose a parent or a sibling before they're 18 years old. That's about 5.3 million kids. And actually, the new numbers that have come out recently changed from 1 in 14 to 1 in 13. That's not good. So that number more than doubles to about 13.9 million by the time these children turn 25. And these numbers don't include other primary caregivers like grandparents or guardians. So we're potentially sending over 5 million, 5.5 million young adults out into the world after high school every year, who may not know how to cope with the significant losses that they've already experienced, and a whole bunch more that will likely experience a loss in the next 4 years or so that are also just not prepared. So there's a huge need. I so appreciate Judy's House for putting together statistics like this. Okay, so while many students report not knowing how to access support, another big issue is the actual lack of support. According to the American School Counseling Association, the national average ratio of counselors to students was 1 to 424. The recommendation is 1 to 250. So there's no way that all students that need support will be able to get it timely and with the frequency needed with numbers like that. And if students have negative experiences accessing support as young children, that can certainly carry over into college, right? So if they grow up with an understanding that school counselors aren't really available, that can affect their decision to seek support when they get to college. Another issue is the burnout amongst counselors. It is real. And that, along with the difficulty that many schools are having in hiring qualified personnel, is really making adequate support very challenging. I read a report recently that said that 93% of clinicians on college campuses have experienced burnout in the fall semester of 2021. 60% of them said that the increase in their caseloads have negatively impacted the quality of their performance. The pandemic has certainly shined a light on the grief that students are experiencing. Students have been asking for more mental health support for a long time, but the pandemic has forced administrators and leaders on college campuses to accept the reality that that's true. So that's a good thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that therapy or counseling is the only answer. I think we often look to them for the answer, but there's other things that we can do. The fact that we need to be more creative in supporting grieving students has become quite clear. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in a bit. The other thing is that the rate of suicide, although it has remained fairly stable, some reports have actually seen a slight decline in the past few years. The number of suicide attempts has risen sharply, especially for adolescent girls. And because only attempts that are that result in some significant physical harm often end up in the ER, we know that attempts are underreported. So that number is even higher. We also know that people have been doing basically anything they can to stay out of the hospital, right? So some people that were physically harmed due to an attempt are still not going to the hospital. So that number is really underreported. And this is important because unsupported childhood grief puts children at risk for all sorts of mental health issues, including eating disorders, self-harm, drug and alcohol misuse, and suicidality. According to the American Federation of Teachers, 70% of teachers have a grieving student in their classroom, some kind of a loss. But only 7% of teachers have any bereavement training. Many teachers report that administrators pay more attention to the dress codes in their school than they do to childhood grief. In one study, teachers reported that only 3% of school districts provide any kind of grief support. And I can tell you that not having grief education for staff can be really detrimental. I worked at 3 different school districts many years ago. The first one, I had no grief training at all. I had worked in a hospice for about a year, but it was with older people that were dying. There was a time that the school nurse died by suicide, and they called all the social workers to the school where it happened to provide support. They didn't really give us any information or training. They just said, go support the kids. This was before social media, so many students didn't know what happened at all, and others had kind of heard a rumor, maybe it was suicide, but it hadn't really been widely discussed. As social workers, like I said, we were given no direction or instruction about how to share this information or how to respond. And I know I did the wrong thing. This was a beloved school nurse. She always had hot chocolate in her office. The kids tended to gather there. And again, I wasn't sure what they knew, but in my attempt to make a student feel better, as he shared that he didn't know why she died, I said something like, well, at least she isn't in pain anymore. Now, I've since learned a bunch, and I know several things. First of all, saying at least is not a good way to start a sentence with a griever. It really minimizes their feelings. Second, I basically told this child that if he's in pain, kill yourself and you won't be in pain anymore. Now, I don't even know if he knew she had died by suicide, but the point is I didn't have the training to provide the appropriate kind of support. And that's why trainings like this and all the trainings that Good Grief does is so important. I would do it so much differently now. Another time, after I had received some training in another district, a student died. And we got a call that all the psychologists had to go to the school to provide grief support. So I look at the psychologist sitting next to me, and she was terrified. She said, I do IQ testing. I don't do grief support. So I called the superintendent and said, the psychologist sitting next to me is not comfortable. I actually have a lot of training at this point. I'll go instead. And the superintendent said, no. The union rules state that the psychologists go, the social workers do not go. So I was not allowed to go. And the psychologist, who really was uncomfortable, had to go and provide some support. So, it just goes to show you how important it is that we're all trained to provide the needed attention and presence to all grieving students. Okay, so how can teachers and staff prepare grieving students for college? So after someone has experienced a loss and that that's their path, there are a few things that we can be doing to make sure that we're helping them with that transition. So we want to help them determine what mental health resources are available on college campuses. So one of the first things is the ratio of counselors to students. I talked about that before. How many sessions do they get? Some schools have a limit, as low as 5 sessions, right? Some schools don't even offer any sessions, and they immediately refer out to a therapist in the community. You also want to look at the mental health office's annual reports on the college campus. You want to know how their money is being spent. Is it being spent on counselors, on awareness campaigns, on crisis support, support groups? Think about what your needs are or what they could be, and try to find a school that meets those needs. Some schools will have grief support on campus, and some of them will have them, they'll know about grief support in the area. If they're in the area, you have to think about whether or not you can get there. So knowing that there's a grief support center 10 minutes from campus is great, but if you don't have reliable transportation, it's not going to be that helpful. So you want to think about that before you go. The other thing I think that's really important, where are the counseling centers on your college campus? So is it that they're in this little dingy building all the way across campus? Or is it that their counseling centers are embedded in sort of the health and wellness facilities, by the gym, by the swimming pool? Some college campuses have offices embedded in different colleges, like I know Penn State has mental health centers like within the College of Education. So you're not actually having to go to the counseling center at all. You just walk into the building where all your classes are. Would you feel comfortable walking into a space like that? You want to think about, what kind of an area, what kind of a space would make you feel safe and comfortable walking into. And then the other thing is that there's student-run mental health organizations on campus. So do they have an active representation on campus with clubs, clubs like maybe Active Minds, that you'd feel included in? So those are important opportunities for kids to get involved. We also really want to encourage peer support. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I think most of you are adults, maybe parents, teachers, volunteers, and that's great. However, we know that students turn to one another when they're struggling before they turn to teachers or counselors. So it's really critical that their peers know how to listen in a supportive way and know how to help them find additional support if they need it. In addition to myself and Good Grief, there's the Coalition to Supporting Grieving Students. It's another great resource with some online trainings that can be very helpful to learn about peer support. There are specific strategies that we can teach young people to be a positive support to somebody who's grieving. So it is available to them. And then the NACG, it's the National Alliance for Children's Grief. It's an alliance of grief support centers around the country. It includes tons of resources. It also has a support group finder. So getting support at the time of their loss is so important. So look to see if there's a grief support center near you so they can get connected right away. Good Grief is obviously on there. Going to a support group helps children to know that they're not alone. It helps them get comfortable talking about their loss. That's why it's so important when they go to college, because often they have to tell people about their loss sometimes for the first time, but certainly it can be the first time in a long time. And being comfortable sharing that information is really key to creating a sense of connection with others when they get to college. You know, I mentioned that there are grief support centers all around the country. There's over 500 of them, but they're not near every campus. So if your child or student is looking for support and the college they're interested in doesn't provide grief support, check the NACG website to see if there's any grief support near you. Another support that may be shared with students is called Heal Grief, which is an amazing free resource for older teens and young adults to get support. They offer virtual support groups for young adults who are grieving. They have an app you can download and you can sign up for these drop-in support groups that can begin sort of like after you finish with an in-person group for young children. And then one other resource I just want to mention is the dinner party. It's one more resource that's good for young people. It's really for people like in their 20s to 40s. But as students are graduating from high school, it's a good thing to know about. It really is about building community, talking about death over dinner, or you don't have to have dinner if you don't want to. You can go to a virtual dinner or be matched to like a buddy or a dinner party. They're tailored to the host's interests. So you might be interested in going to a suicide loss group or a BIPOC space or a parent loss group or a sibling loss group or an LGBTQ kind of a group. So all of those are some really good resources. I share a bunch at the end of my presentation, but if they're not on there and you have questions, you can certainly reach out. So I just want to talk a little bit more about loss. Loss is not just death. Young adults experience so many losses. In reality, just going to college is a loss, although we often don't think about it in terms like that because we work so hard, right? It's like the goal is to get there, and students and parents and teachers and everybody that's supporting them, that's the goal. So we don't think of it in terms of loss, but it also often is, right? Even though it's an incredible gain, we do experience loss. I'm going to share some losses that college students may experience, but I'm also going to put a link to a Jamboard in the chat box. So Evelyn, if you can do that, you can click on this link and add some of your own ideas about what losses some of the young adults or college students that you work with or know may experience in addition to some of the ones that I'm mentioning. So if you're not familiar with the Jamboard, when you click on the link, you're going to see on the left-hand side, there's like a little box that kind of looks like a sticky note. And if you click on it, you can just write a little note. It's anonymous. No one knows who wrote it. But just if you have ideas about some of the losses that either you experienced in college or people that you know might be experiencing. So one of the first ones that I was thinking about, certainly related to COVID, was in-person learning. But there's a ton that we all kind of, many of the students that we're working with are dealing with. So even just their environment, like, the smells, their bed, all the kinds of things that they're used to in their room, creating friendships and feeling isolated, all the routines and structure that they had at home are different. And then obviously mental health. College students have consistently been identified as having more mental health concerns and exacerbations of pre-existing conditions than most other age groups. So big, sometimes sudden changes in our mental health can really feel like a significant loss of functioning for college students, and one that's often stigmatized and not provided with the right kinds of support. So feel free to just add any other ones that you're thinking of or that you're aware of with anybody that you've worked with or that maybe you experienced when you were in school. Okay, so I'm going to just share a story. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so you can just see me. Okay, so I'm going to share a story of a young man named Ethan. Hold on, I just want to make sure I could see myself on the screen. Okay, so this is a box of dominoes. I hope you can see that. My light's a little shining, but okay. He was a freshman in college, and these dominoes sort of represent all the pieces of his life. He has like a mom and a dad, and he's got, a younger sister. He's very interested in college basketball, so that's up here. He's got lots of friends. They're all over the place. He likes music and video games. So all these things are sort of in the box, right? He's a college student, so, school is somewhere in there. All of these dominoes represent lots of pieces of his life. He has this little morning routine where he goes to Dunkin' Donuts. And then his dad died. And all the pieces of his life crashed all over the place. And it takes a minute to catch his breath. For a while, he just stares at all the pieces of his life that are all over the floor. It's actually quite disorienting. He picks up his mom and his sister immediately. He puts them right back in the box. But they don't go in exactly the same way. They're different. But he knows he has to be there for them. He also picks up a couple of his friends, but actually not all of them. Some of them just aren't there for him the way that he expected or needed. School goes back in, but differently. He's really struggling with concentrating, with focusing. Sometimes he just doesn't see the point of learning. He's trying to go to class, but he doesn't always make it. He's just having a lot of trouble, being in class. He does add something. He adds a photography club. His dad actually was a big photographer. He feels really close to him when he's taking pictures. So he adds that into his new box. But the rest of it, he's still just kind of figuring out. And I ask each of you, whose job is it to pick up the rest of these dominoes? Some of you may have had literally a physical response when his dominoes fell. You may have, like leaves were like, oh no, they're falling. You may have some kind of a number in mind that you want to, to help pick up these pieces. Is it days? Does he get a week, a month? Some of you might have said he gets as much time as he needs, which would be like the right answer if there was one. But But the reality is we don't often do that. I'm an adjunct college professor myself, and I know that I just can't say to someone, take all the time you need to write this paper. I'll grade it next year when you're ready, or come to class when you're ready. The semester is going to be over by then, but feel free, right? We can't always give people as much time as we'd like, but it is important to remember that just because they're showing up or they're taking a test doesn't mean that they're not still grieving and experiencing some really intense grief reactions. I do this activity often, and every time I do it, it sort of takes my breath away. Listening and seeing me do the exercise may have also taken your breath away. It may have done, brought up some significant feelings for you. Maybe you're thinking about some of your own losses or someone that's going through something significant. We've all had a moment where our dominoes have just fallen. So I just want to normalize that and, offer a second to take a deep breath, take a drink, move your body if you need to. I'll get my screen back up, but I'll just give you a second while we just kind of absorb and process that for a second. Okay. So we're going to move out of our heart space for a minute and go back into this headspace where we're learning. So I hope you're all with me. So there are different ways that we may see grief manifest in young adults. Cognitive responses can be significant because the young adult brain is continuing to develop. As they're more able to think abstractly and form their own opinions and beliefs, they can spend a lot of time thinking about and forming thoughts and feelings about the loss in ways that they would not have been able to do when they were younger. For example, telling a young child that daddy died, and that means that his body doesn't work and we put his body in the ground, that may be enough information for them. Someone in their late teens and 20s will likely be able to think more deeply about life and death, their own mortality. They may question some of the beliefs that they had while they were growing up, or spend time trying to understand how the loss will impact the rest of their lives. So it could look a little bit like they're daydreaming, right? They're just thinking a lot. It can make concentrating, absorbing concepts particularly difficult. They may look distracted, but it's often their way of processing a significant loss. So I said they might show up to class, but it doesn't really mean that they're there. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed, I try to use the word reactions, not symptoms. So when I say grief reactions, I try not to use the word symptoms because symptoms is a medical term. Grief is not a medical issue, right? It's not a disorder. It's not pathological. It's normal and natural. So I really try to use the word reaction when I'm talking about grief. So when someone in your late teens or early 20s dies, when you're in your late teens or 20s, you may have been, sort of naturally, developmentally separating and becoming more independent from them. So that can create a little bit of guilt and anger because perhaps you weren't spending as much time with them as you had been, years earlier, or perhaps your relationship was a little strained as you were trying to separate, right? Another thing about this age developmentally is that young adults are often very egocentric. You may hear them say things like, every time I wear this shirt, the Yankees win, right? Or every time I hear this song, something bad happens. We all do it to some extent, but it is more prominent in young children and then again in adolescents. So they may believe that they're being punished for doing something wrong, or if they're really good, they can bring the person back. It's a way for them to cope, for all of us to cope and process the loss in smaller doses. So we're not constantly feeling hopeless. And some of that is age appropriate and actually helpful. But of course, if you take too much responsibility for the death, that can be really harmful emotionally. And I just want to say one other thing about feelings. Often when we're feeling like we're vulnerable and we can't control our emotions, we feel something called shame. Like there's this sense that there's something wrong with us. If you think about the last time you cried in public, what was the first thing you said to the other people in the room? Likely it was, "I'm sorry," right? We apologize because we feel like we're doing something wrong. That feeling is shame. I know most of us would say that there's no shame in grief or in crying, but it's a fairly universal feeling, especially in this country, that we feel like we're doing something wrong or we're being a burden to someone when we express intense feelings. Young people are already in a very vulnerable position. If they're in college, they're meeting new people, they're trying to make friends, they're, worrying about grades or getting a job or all of those things. So they've got so many things that create this sense of vulnerability. So when they experience a loss, their feelings may be even more intense, and that can create this sense of shame. I've listed a bunch of common physical reactions that I don't need to read to you, but it's just a reminder that we feel grief in our bodies. And when we don't feel well physically, we can become irritable, we can have difficulty getting our work done, our motivation can be affected, all of those things. And when we're trying to understand the unimaginable, sometimes we develop a sense that things don't matter. And when we feel out of control, we often act that way. So that may mean that we're engaging in significantly more risky behavior because who cares, right? We're all going to die anyway. Or perhaps it becomes difficult to find pleasure in things that we used to enjoy. So we isolate from friends and families. That's also a very common behavioral response. So you may see some of those things. I'm going to talk a bit later about how to address that. But for now, we'll just hold on to that thought. So I wanted to just give you a second to look over this list, see what you think would be helpful for yourself. You may think about when you were a young adult, if you're past that stage, or maybe you know someone who is in that stage, so you can think about what do you think they would want when they're grieving. If I could ask each of you, I would probably get very different responses. Some of you may say that you appreciate a hug. Others might say that you definitely don't want hugs. Some might say that they like to hear stories about the person that died. And then other people might say that it's just too painful for them to think about, them when they were healthy. Some people might say that they want to feel closer to a higher power or want advice from friends, while others would want to learn about grief and loss, maybe read a book or talk to a friend or a therapist. The problem is that we're all not mind readers, and we don't walk around with a sign that says what we would want when we're grieving, right? But what we tend to do for others what we would want done for ourselves. So if any of you are parents, you've probably heard yourself say something like, "I know what they need." I know I've said that about my own children. Often we don't. We project our own needs onto them, right? So the next time you're trying to provide support for someone who's grieving, ask them if that's something that would be helpful to them. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I think it would be helpful for me? Or am I doing it because I actually think that this is what they need right now? So good hints and good things to be thinking about when you're providing support. So I wanted to talk about how we can teach students to share feelings, students and children, and connect with others around their grief. And the best thing we can do is to model for them some vulnerability. This doesn't mean that you have to share your own personal stories and details with them, but you can show them that you're affected by things. You can be affected by their stories or by current events. You could say things like, that would make me really sad. How does it make you feel? I think often looking strong may send this message that feelings are not okay. And as we all know, students often look up to teachers or to parents and want to be just like them. So if you look stoic and unemotional, they may try to imitate that and not show their feelings. sometimes suppressing our own feelings so we can make space for theirs does just the opposite. I've heard so many people say things like, I'm just trying to be strong for the kids right now, right? So they're like, I'm not going to show my feelings or address them right now. And while I totally understand that sentiment, the strategy actually could be backfiring, right? We want to show them appropriate ways to express our feelings. Talk to them about how you express your feelings. Talk to them about how you cope with them, right? You listen to music, or you go for a run, or you write, or you play sports, or you play some video games, whatever it is that you do. But talking to them, letting them know you're a person too, and that you struggle sometimes with big feelings is really important. But I also think that it's important to know your own limits. You might not be in a place where you can absorb the emotional pain of others. So knowing that is also a gift, because showing people that you're taking care of yourself is equally important. So it's okay to say, listen, I can tell what you're going through right now is really important, and you deserve the right amount of attention and time. And I wish I could give that to you, but I just can't. So I'm going to introduce you to my friend, or, the guidance counselor, or the school nurse, or, the volunteer listener, or the crisis hotline, whatever it is, so that I know that you're getting the attention and the support that you need. So it's really important to validate their feelings and share some of your own reactions, and also know what your limits are. So I want to think about how to support grievers on a college campus. According to one study in 2020, 71% of college students said that talking about their loss helped them, but only 32% spoke to a teacher and 27% spoke to a counselor. So this shows the opportunity for teachers and other school staff to create spaces for students to feel comfortable sharing. It doesn't have to be in a formal way like a counseling center. I spoke to a psychology teacher at Champlain College in Vermont. She had said that students weren't showing up to the mental health meetings. So she changed the mental health meeting to a club. She called it Managing the Monkey, which is really all about anxiety. And she said she got such a great turnout. There was food, they were in the cafeteria, it wasn't private, like it was just a club. So we have to be creative when we're thinking about ways to support students. So who are the people that can be considered grief identifiers and supporters on a college campus? You may be familiar with all of these categories of people, or maybe you're not. If you're not, it's likely that your high school students aren't either. But perhaps if you're a parent and you're taking your kids on college tours, if you're a guidance counselor and you're talking to colleges about what's available, you can ask questions about how to get to know these people, what roles they play in supporting students after a loss. Students should be aware of all of these potential supporters so they can really get acquainted and comfortable in case of a need down the line. And each of these supporters, these people should be receiving training. So ask them what kind of training and education they've received when considering if that school is the right emotional fit. So this is a support map. Support maps can be made by sitting down with a student, helping them identify different supports in various communities that they're part of. For example, you may identify people in your family, then your close friends and roommates. Next, you might think about the larger community, such as sports or clubs, religious organizations, academic supports, including teachers, advisors. Then you might consider professional supports like therapists, tutors, doctors. You can use this support map if you want, or you can make your own support map and add different kinds of communities on a college campus or in whatever environment you're in, but they can be really a helpful tool in identifying potential supports. So parents or guidance counselors or teachers, whoever, can really sit down with the student and use a support map like this to help them identify where they can go in a new environment they're in. So I thought we'd just watch a short video from Megan Devine of Refuge in Grief. I'm a big fan. It really exemplifies the value of listening and acknowledging a loss. The video talks a lot about death, but it can be used for any kind of a loss. So I'm just gonna show this quick video.
So what do we do about all the pain we see in the world? All the pain we feel in our own lives? And why does it seem like our best efforts to help somebody feel better always backfire? I've been studying intense grief and loss, baby death, violent crimes, accidents, suicides, and natural disasters. And I've learned something really interesting. Cheering people up, telling them to be strong and persevere, helping them move on, it doesn't actually work. It's kind of a puzzle. It seems counterintuitive, but the way to help someone feel better is to let them be in pain. This is true for those giant losses and the ordinary everyday ones. Educator Parker Palmer writes, "The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed exactly as it is." He's talking about acknowledgement here. Acknowledgement is this really amazing multi-tool. It makes things better even when they can't be made right. For example, somebody's struggling. Their baby died, or there's been a bad accident, or their mom got sick, and they're just sad. It's way more helpful to join them in their pain than it is to cheer them up. But here's what we tend to do instead. "You have 2 other children, you need to find joy in them." Or, "You know what you need? You just need to go out dancing and shake it off." Or, "I felt really sad once. Did you try acupuncture?" We're not really sure what to do with someone's pain, so we do what we've been taught. We look on the bright side. We try to make people feel better. We give them advice. It's not like this is nefarious. I mean, we try to cheer people up because we think that's our job. We're not supposed to let people stay sad. The problem is, you can't heal somebody's pain by trying to take it away from them. Now, acknowledgement does something different. When a giant hole opens up in someone's life, it's actually much more supportive to acknowledge that hole and let pain exist. It's actually a radical act to let things hurt. It goes against what we've been taught. In order to really support you, I have to acknowledge that things really are as bad as they feel to you. If I try to cheer you up, you end up defending yourself and your feelings. If I give you advice, you feel misunderstood instead of supported. And I don't get what I want either, because I wanted you to feel better. It's pretty rare that you could actually talk somebody out of their pain. Rarely does the admonishment to look on the bright side actually heal things for someone. It just makes them stop telling you about their pain. It's so tempting to try to make things better. When somebody shares something painful, it's much more helpful to say, "I'm sorry that's happening. Do you want to tell me about it?" To be able to say, "This hurts," without being talked out of it, that's what helps. Being heard helps. It seems too simple to be of use, but acknowledgement can be the best medicine we have. It makes things better, even when they can't be made right.
So some of you may really resonate with that. I find I learn something every time I watch that video. But I just think it really underscores the need to just to listen and not judge the behavior, not try to fix things, which is really hard. It's not to say that we don't have expectations about behavior, but when people are behaving, they're just communicating, right? They're just letting us know how they're doing. So if we feel chaotic, we may act impulsively. If we're feeling sad, we may isolate. Our goal really as supporters is to validate the feelings, not judge the behavior, and just remain available to the griever to express themselves. Okay, so back to how to support grievers through some concrete ways in schools. Every school district, every college campus is different. So all of these strategies might not work for each individual school, but I just wanted to acknowledge them, give you guys some ideas that you might be able to think about. The first one is just creating a really good grief policy. Individual teachers often will create their own policy, but a broader macro system level grief policy on campus can be really important. It creates a liaison between students and staff so that they can be notified after a loss. It's really difficult if each teacher creates their own policy, like things like attendance, right, or deadlines. It's a lot to remember for one student. This teacher will let me, take an extra week. This one said I get an extra day. I almost like to think of it, if you work in schools, like a 504 plan for grief. So if there was an opportunity for students to meet with the counselor, kind of create a plan, what's going to be, needed for them, and then let all of their teachers know, that would be, in my mind, ideal. Check-ins in class, they don't take that long, and they really do free your brain to concentrate after you kind of just check in with your students. I do that with my college students. Takes a couple minutes. Sometimes somebody will share something, just like, I'm having a rough time. I think we're often worried that we don't have enough time in our classrooms to do that, but I really think it frees them up to get that off their chest. They can absorb, concentrate a little bit more. So I think it's really valuable. Obviously, modifying assignments, changing the weight of certain grades is a good strategy. If they just took a test and it was worth 10%, and then someone dies, and then a week later they have another test that's worth 50%, perhaps you're going to change the weight of that grade, right? And make the one that they took before the loss worth more, because it's going to show more of what they're actually capable of. Think about people like resident assistants, other student leaders that can be trained to provide a listening ear. Remember, grief is normal, right? So there's nothing to fix. There's nothing to do, just to listen, right? We talked about support groups, both on campus and off campus, other resources like the student clubs, like Managing the Monkey that I mentioned. And you can also we can all think about, like, what spaces are available on our campus. Maybe there's an amazing tree that everybody likes to sit under and journal, or, a room in the library that offers privacy if somebody wants to have a telehealth session, or different clubs that allow you to, explore creativity and your belief systems. So there's lots of other kinds of informal supports that we should be thinking about. And I just wanted to reinforce a few strategies that I mentioned already. Some people are afraid to ask how someone's doing because they think they're going to open up a floodgate, or because they don't think that they know how to respond. But often, if we're just quiet, they will share something with us that they haven't been able to say to another human before. And it often doesn't take that long. When I do in-person trainings, I often do a listening activity. It's 2 minutes. I teach people a little bit more about how to listen. And then we do this little activity that really demonstrates how much we can share in 2 minutes if we really stop talking and listening. I use this acronym WAIT, W-A-I-T, why am I talking? To remind myself to stop talking, to stop giving advice, to stop cheering someone up, trying to fix things, just let them talk. And after they share, we validate, we normalize the experience. And also, I mentioned already, like, remember that if you're not in the right space to hear their story, that is okay. So knowing your own limits and setting boundaries, taking good care of yourself is also so important and a gift to the griever, because you're not going to be able to give them the support that they need. So making sure that they know that you're not the person, and maybe helping them find the right person is really a gift. And then quickly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about self-care. I think you had David Schoenfeld here for another webinar, but I love this quote: supporting grieving students in the best of times can be difficult. We are not in the best of times. Students right now have significant needs, and unfortunately, many of us do also. Often when we're asked to care for a child, we're in a good place and we're able to do that. Or even if we are struggling, we're struggling with different things. But right now we're all struggling, right? So listening to the issues that students have could be similar to the issues that you have, and that could exacerbate some of your own, grief reactions. So self-care becomes even more important. I hate talking about self-care. When I used to think about self-care, I talked about, vacations and spa days and, other big things. And I always felt like, okay, well, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, and now I just, it's an additional stress to think about, like, oh, now I have to take care of myself and I can't afford it and I don't have the time and all of that stuff. So I've really trying to change my idea about that. I think a lot about the word communicare, taking care of one another. And how can we do that at work? Staff meetings can have check-ins just like classrooms can. Families can share a grocery list in a shared note, right? So that whoever goes to the store can just pick up everything that's needed. There's all different ways that we could support one another, both at home and at work. If you go back to that Jamboard, there's a page 2. If you look at the very top, it says 1 out of 2. And if there's a little like arrow next to that, you can click on the arrow. And you can put down some other strategies that you have that you've used at work that have been helpful for yourself, maybe like a walking meeting or, different ways online that maybe you've been able to support colleagues at work, because I think it's really important that we're thinking about smaller sort of micro system ways to take care of yourself. I remember one day I was walking by a colleague's office and she said, "Can you come in my office?" And I said, "Give me a second. I have to just run to the bathroom." And she said, "Oh, of course. I didn't mean to interrupt your self-care." And I thought, oh my God, is going to the bathroom self-care now? And then I kind of realized, like, well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't gotten up yet. So yeah, it is self-care. So there are really important things, very simple things that we can all be doing to making sure that we're taking good care of ourselves, standing up and walking away from our desk, right? So feel free to share your ideas in there as well. I did want to just share a couple of other resources, some of which I've mentioned. Megan Devine's video, if you liked it, she has a great book. I feel like I should get a commission on it. But it's called How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed. It's a great book for young adults as well as older adults. Grief Coach is another one that's I found to be really helpful with the young adult population. It's a texting service. So you sign up for a subscription and you get a couple of texts a month for about a year. So the griever gets the texts, but as well, you can sign up a couple friends and then they get texts that will tell them how to support their friend who's grieving, which is really nice. If you use that link right there, you'll get like a discount or something. $10 off or something. All right, so here's all of my information. I did want to just share that as well. I so appreciate getting to spend some time with you. I wish I could see all of you, but if you do have questions, feedback for me, any comments that you'd like me to hear, I am available. Reach out any way that is comfortable for you. I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy. I am going to put into the chat before we get any further. We have the SOHO survey. We really do appreciate your feedback. We do take your ideas seriously. So if you have any ideas about any future direction topics, people that you would like us to reach out to see if we could get them to be a part of our community webinar series, please give us that feedback. We did have just one question in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to do a little Q&A, but we had a question that said, curious on your thoughts on how to support without one-upping, our need to share about our loss.
Yes.
And the one we're supporting needs to share.
My guess is that question came when I said, like, you can be vulnerable too. And I am so glad that you talked about that, because you're right. It's so unhelpful when someone says, my dad died, and then you say, oh, I get it. My mom died. And let me tell you about that. And all of a sudden it's about you. So that's why I love that acronym. Wait, why am I talking? If you notice that you start talking because you have, something on your mind that you want to share, you might want to stop talking, right? Hold that for your own support system. But if somebody has come to you and said, I'm really struggling, you could say, I get it. I've had similar feelings. Tell me more about what's going on for you. So our goal when we speak, when we're actually being a listener, is to get the talker to say more. So when you're saying something, your goal is not to one-up them. Your goal is to get them to talk more. So how do you do that? By sharing, right? I understand what you're going, we never really understand what other people are going through, but it's been a really tough time for me too. Tell me, what do you want me to know about your experience? So asking a question like that, I always like to say, like, inviting them to share. That's the goal, right? If you feel like you're one-upping, perhaps it's a good reminder to you to be quiet and to make sure that you get some support after. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, and I think we all slip into some of these habits sometimes. And you know what, you just catch yourself. Sometimes you say, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Let's-
This is not about me today,
yeah.
right?
And then you continue just sort of keeping the focus
Yep.
on the other person.
Yep. I also do some therapy on the side. So I have a client who frequently asks me, how are you doing? And I'm always like, oh, that's so nice. Like, are you my therapist today? No. But I have to remind myself, like, I would love to tell her how I'm doing, but it's not my turn right now.
Yeah, I'm looking in the chat just to see if there's any other questions. This one, I have no idea, but they were asking if we've seen any good results with college students being able to access their parents' employee assistance program for mental health. That I'm not sure.
I don't know. I haven't had that come up too much. It would be great because there's really, like I said, a lack of, resources available. So.
And a request for, it looks like, suicide specific resources for young adults.
Suicide specific. So there's the AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They've got some really great resources. Some of the resources that I listed at the end of the presentation also, they have a lot of good resources on suicide. If you go to my website, I also have some blogs with some information about suicide loss, about the language that you can use with suicide, talking about memorials and things like that.
Yeah, really helpful. And then if you want to send me some of those links, I can also put that in the follow-up communication to everyone who attended today. So when you'll get the survey again, you'll get your certificate of attendance, and we can also give you some further resources as well, so you can continue your learning and engage with this really important topic of supporting our young adults.
Excellent.
So yeah, I think that's it for today. We are 3 minutes over, so I am so grateful for your time, for everyone's time that participated today. So just want to end with gratitude and big thanks. And yes, you will be hearing from us, and we'll see you back here again for our webinars in September. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.